You know, it just cracks me up when I ask an adult, what are you afraid of? And the first thing that usually comes out of his or her mouth is, I'm not afraid of nothing. Or, I used to be, we always like to put in the past tense, I used to be afraid of this. I used to be afraid of that. I used to be afraid of heights. I used to be afraid of public speaking. I used to be afraid of dead people. I used to be afraid to sleep in the dark at night. But if you go to my house right now, in my room, there's a nightlight. If somebody dies, I usually sit in the back of the funeral. If somebody asks me to speak, I come up with every single excuse that I can ever think of, and I just put it off. If someone asks me to fly somewhere, I'll try to drive instead. It's a hour flight, but it's 10 hours if I decide to drive it. It's so many ways that we can avoid the things that we're fearful of until what Job in chapter 3, verse 25, the NIV says, what I feared has come upon me. What I dreaded has happened to me. What happens when we run out of space to run from the things that we're fearful of? Do we face it head on, or do we crawl back and we wonder why things continually happen to us? Job was a man who was upright. He was blameless. God called him an upright man, blameless before God. And the devil, with God's permission, was allowed to take things from him, his possessions, his animals, his house, even his children. He had 10 children. They all died. And in chapter 2 of Job, Job's wife even was like, you still are standing with integrity? You still having integrity? I'm paraphrasing what she said. She's like, you might as well curse God and die. He's like, you crazy. In so many words. He's like, no. He still was standing by what God was doing. He was saying, the Lord gives, the Lord takes away. But then that's when the devil placed sores all over his body. And that took it to a different level. Job was an upright, blameless man, but just like us, he had fears. The things that he feared losing things. He feared. There's one thing about fear. Fear is something that can paralyze us from doing anything that God has called us to do. But when fear comes to us, we have a choice to make. We can run from it. But like Job, he had to face it. He had to go through it. The best way to face a fear is to go through the fear. And I know that sounds very cliche. I know you're probably wanting to hear something better than that, but that's the honest truth. The things that I was fearful of, I had to face them. I remember when I was afraid of flying because I was afraid of heights. Until I moved far enough away from home, Jersey's always going to be home. I moved so far away that it was too long to drive. I'd rather take an hour and a half flight than drive over 10 hours. I had to face my fear. I had to get on that plane. And I remember when I first started flying, I'm like, man, I would get anxious. My stomach would all start messing up. Now, I'm like, God, you got this. I go to sleep. Turbulence and all, sleep. I remember when I used to be afraid of dead people. I remember being a little kid. It was a distant relative of mine that passed away. And I remember looking in the casket. I'm like, wow, they don't even look the same. It looks kind of freaky. And then coupled with, scary movies and things like that, it used to make me really uncomfortable until people that were close to me began to die. And I could no longer say, I'm sitting in the back. I had to sit with the family. I could no longer say, I'll miss this funeral. I had to be there to support. I remember when I used to be afraid of public speaking until my mother, she started volunteering me in church events and start, speaking in front of people and things like that. And I could no longer run to the back. I began to get taller than a lot of people, so then I could no longer fit in with those that were behind me. I was the one in the back where they can see me. And they're like, Joe, come on. When are we going to realize that fear and faith cannot exist together? The more fear you have, the more it diminishes your level of faith. God is calling for you to be faithful. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. You may not see yourself out of your situation. You may always see yourself being fearful of the things that you're scared of. I'm just using some of my things that I was afraid of. And even sometimes now, fear tries to creep in my mind. Whenever I'm speaking in front of people, it's like, oh, you're going to stutter just like you did back when you were a kid. I'm not a kid anymore. We have to stay in the present. Oh, you're afraid of dead people. You can't attend this funeral to support the people that are closest to you. The devil is a liar. I'm in here. Oh, you get on that plane, that might be your last time. Why does our mind automatically go to the worst things? The devil is always dealing with our mind and the way that we perceive ourselves. That's why it's so important for us to perceive ourselves the way that God sees us. Because if we see us like God sees us, we can't see us the way the devil wants us to see us. Don't buy into the lie, y'all. Face that fear head on, and I'm encouraging you today. It's difficult. It's not easy to do this, but hang in there. Face your fears, because the thing that you may be afraid of, you may have to confront. And when it's time for you to confront it, how are you going to respond?